Welcome to the future, where the glass is half full and you'll need new glasses, where you'll be jumping from conclusions.
The past is annulled, and a new future is born.
Never before in history has so much meant so little to so many. AD on the radio.
You know, here we are officially in the summertime. And you know what I think one of the best things about summertime was as a kid? As a child, I deeply resented this thing because you had this everlasting summer during which you had no responsibility. You had no classes that you had to show up for. You had no homework that you had to do. And that was just freaking grand. However, I don't know if it happened to you around the same time, but do you remember like 4th or 5th grade? Maybe it was once you got into middle school, like 5th or 6th grade or something along those lines. All of a sudden, this massive, everlasting summer that stretched out before you, months of pure, unadulterated joy and freedom, started to be chipped away at by your school. How? With summer reading programs. Ugh. And I can't tell you how deeply I resented that at the time. I was like, isn't it enough? Isn't it enough that I have to show up, act as though I care, be polite to teachers, find a way to finish my homework assignment on the school bus and in lunch so that I never have to do it when I get home? Oh, man, the idea of homework deeply offended my childhood sensibilities. I was like, no, you get enough of my life during the day. You want to eat into my fun time at home? No, I refuse. I bluntly refuse. I'll do this on the bus. I'll do this on the way home. I will do this at lunchtime. I'll do this in the 15 minutes before the period starts. I would do anything to get out of completing homework assignments at home. So I took it as a great affront to my personal sense of freedom and independence that I celebrated and still do to this day. Although in those days, my view of tyranny was Mrs. Smith's 4th grade English class. But I took it as a great affront to my personal liberty when I was asked to do summer reading. Oh, the worst. Wait a second. You're telling me that you're going to eat into my free time? You're going to eat into my young happiness? I'm going to have to do a book report on this stuff? No. What the hell, man? What the hell? But the thing is, I was a bit of a bargainer back then. And we had this list of approved summer reading books. And I remember asking my teacher, honestly, do I really have to read these summer reading books, like these specific titles that are on the summer reading list? Is that stuff that I have to read? Or can I sort of just, read and write a report next year on one of these things? And my English teacher at the time was like, well, I don't really know. I'm not sure. I'm actually not going to be here next year, and you're going to have a different teacher. And I was like, oh, well, if that's the case, I know what to do with that. So I just read whatever the hell I wanted to. And then the next year, knowing that my previous English teacher had moved to a different country and that I was fresh slating with this new English teacher, I was just like, hey, the summer reading program. And they're like, right, you got to write a book report on that. It'll be due soon. I was like, cool. But I read Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and So Long and Thanks for All the Fish and P.G. Wodehouse and Dante's Inferno, none of which were on the list. But see, my old English teacher said that I could just read those and write a book report on them. They're like, oh, it's a little unusual, but okay. All right, fine. Yeah, sure. These are all noted and respected authors. Okay. So I did. And I'll never forget. I actually got joy out of an assignment. I think it was the first time that I ever felt like there was joy in learning. Admittedly, it was an assignment that I'd sort of bended and twisted to my own selfish literary needs, and enjoyed the aspect of getting one over on a teacher by reading off the summer reading list and being allowed to write a book report on whatever the hell I wanted to, as opposed to what the hell they told me to read. But I remember thinking about it and going, there's real joy in some of this schoolwork stuff that I've grown to hate so much and seen as an attack on my personal freedoms as a child. So I love summer reading. I love devouring as many books as possible. I don't obviously get that long summer break that you and me and all of us had when we were kids, but there's something about summertime that just makes me want to crack open a book. And I would love it if you did. I would love it if you would encourage your kids to as well, if you have kids. And I think this becomes more and more important as we disappear down the wormhole known as the digital age. I found out something today that made me want to issue this call of arms to read, read, read. Why? It's important, and we'll get into it next.
Real radio.
104.1.
Where the left and right come together for fundamental truths. AD on the radio, on Twitter at ADSXE.
So, I always loved reading, like I said, when I was a kid. I would get in trouble for reading in class. I would have, my copy of The Hardy Boys, or I would have my copy of Lord of the Rings, or I'd have my copy of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy behind the book that I was supposed to be paying attention to in history class. And I remember this one teacher was like, I can't believe I'm yelling at a student for reading in class. And I need you to put that away, and I need you to pay attention to the history book. But bravo, glad you're willing to break rules to read. I was like, okay, loved reading. And thought it was so important. But these summer reading programs that we had to take part in wound up being my first experience of there being real joy in learning. And I thought that was important. And I thought that was cool because here are these books that I loved and I loved reading. And I had to kind of collect some thoughts. I had to decide why these books were valuable. I had to decide what they did right, what they did wrong, what I would have changed a little bit. And it made me think about something that I was enjoying. Why? As opposed to just enjoying it. And there's nothing wrong with just enjoying a book, but it made me, for the first time ever, think there's happiness in learning. Go figure. Who would have thought that? It's not just an affront to my personal sense of liberty. But I'll never forget reading a couple of different authors. And I remember there was this one summer where I went through a bunch of P.G. Wodehouse. And if you've never read P.G. Wodehouse, please, please, please read any P.G. Wodehouse. Great place to start is any of the Jeeves and Wooster books. And there's so many collected books and short stories, and they've been reprinted and printed again so many different times. If you've got one of those Amazon Kindle things or any kind of e-reader, a lot of his books are so old that they're in the public domain, so you can get them for free. Please dive in. If you've never experienced P.G. Wodehouse before, and you're gonna for the first time, I am intensely jealous of you. But guys like P.G. Wodehouse were often regarded, even though P.G. Wodehouse's work was sort of a precursor to Seinfeld in that, no hugging, no learning. It was very light, surfacey, non-heady stuff, despite the fact that he wrote about trivial things. The language in it was some of the most beautiful, expressive language that has ever been committed to print. Incredible. People hold P.G. Wodehouse up right next to Shakespeare in terms of his command of the English language. But I'll never forget reading P.G. Wodehouse and then reading Douglas Adams, the guy that wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, who was greatly influenced by Wodehouse, and thinking, man, I learned a lot from these books. I learned a lot. I learned a lot of new words. I learned a lot of new expressions. I felt as though I was smarter after reading those books. And then I read Dante's Inferno, which had a lot of big words. I think I remember some person saying that it was regarded as, well, it's a classic book, but some people say it's the classic. Dante's Inferno takes you through all the levels of hell. And you see various people being punished for various sins that they made during their lifetimes. And then at the bottom of hell, in the final layer of hell, Who do we see? We see Judas Iscariot, encased for all eternity, not in fire, but in ice, looking upwards for all time so that he can see the horror of his sins against Jesus, knowing what it is that he did. Powerful stuff, but along the way, lots of big words that I didn't understand. Lots of SAT words. It was one of those books where I went, I'm smart. I'm a smart kid. People say this is the classic. Well, that's what I'm reading this summer. Yes, what are you reading? Dante's Inferno. Some people say it's the classic. What do you think? Oh, you haven't read it yet? Gosh, what's it like down there in the foothills of life? This is my idiotic six-brain mind as I went to read Dante's Inferno, and it made me feel stupider, not smarter. It made me feel like I was deficient in some way. It's an amazing book, and I've read it a couple times since. And here's the thing. The language in it is still tough. There's times where you're going to want to reach for your dictionary. There's times where you're going to read a sentence over and over again going, I'm not entirely sure if I'm getting the point of this. I always felt the same way about Shakespeare as well. A lot of people regard him as the greatest writer ever. I never once felt like I was invited to the party with Shakespeare. People were like, oh, the bard. Oh, Shakespeare is wonderful. You really must read him. And I would read him and I'd feel like, oh, God, this is hard work. I'm not getting into it. I feel as though there's a snidey intellectual party going on here with people that like Shakespeare, and I am on the outside of it, and I'm not invited. But when I read P.G. Wodehouse, and when I read Douglas Adams, and when I read Garrison Keillor, the guy, Lake Wobegon Days, that dude who's a brilliant writer as well. I remember learning so much. And there's this thing about language when it's used properly. Someone with a massive vocabulary and a huge control of the English language, if they're using it right, can do this thing where you almost feel wrapped in it. You almost feel embraced by the words. You feel lost in the pages, and you wind up understanding a situation that much more clearly because of the use of language. Language is beautiful when it is used properly, when it is used to bring people in and not exclude. And there's something that is being lost, like I said, something that I found out today that shocked me, that made me go, we've got to read. Just freaking read. Grab a book. Give your kid that book. Read it together. Reading. It's so important, and I'll let you know exactly why and what we're in danger of losing next.
For more stimulation and less irritation, 9 out of 10 doctors choose KPRC AM 950, Houston's more stimulating talk radio.
Don't get the blues, get all the news. We mean all of you guys out there in Radioland. All aboard!
He's back. AD on the radio.
Give it up, yeah. Give it up, yeah. Bring this on, come on, come on.
So I guess I could just talk about the writing of Douglas Adams, who wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, or P.G. Wodehouse, who wrote all my favorite books, the Jeeves and Wooster books. Or I could just read you some of what I'm talking about. Some things that absolutely made me fall in love with the English language. Like P.G. Wodehouse's description of a man who'd had a few too many scones. He said, the Right Honorable was a tubby little chap who looked as if he'd been poured into his clothes and forgotten to say when. Or, the fascination of shooting as a sport depends almost wholly on whether you are on the right or wrong end of the gun. Douglas Adams said, a common mistake that people make when trying to design something completely foolproof is to underestimate the ingenuity of complete fools. Or when he said, in the beginning the universe was created. This made a lot of people very angry and has been widely regarded as a bad move. And finally, because if you're like me, you relate to this one very, very strongly. If you've got a job that is based in any way, shape, or form around deadlines and meeting them, Douglas Adams described them as such. He said, I love deadlines. I love the whooshing sound they make as they fly by. It's genius stuff. And reading words that have been put together in that kind of masterful way, it allows you to get lost in language. It allows you to learn. It's warming. It's comforting. It's like a hug. And it's a brilliant and beautiful thing. And it teaches us to use language in a much more effective way. Like I said, people with big vocabularies sort of fall into two different groups. Group one, they want to set themselves apart. They want to show that they're better than you and that you're not a part of their intellectual party by using words of many syllables that you don't understand and making you feel like you're left out. They want to intellectually flex through the use of their massive vocabulary, and that's just a jerk move is what that is. But you get into writers like Adams. You get into writers like P.G. Wodehouse, and language draws you closer, makes you feel smarter. Have you ever been around someone really, really smart, very, very intelligent? And just the act of being around them makes you feel for a second as though you're a smarter, better person than what you were when you started talking to them. I had that experience with teachers and people that I meet where I feel like, oh my gosh, I'm elevated as a human being by being around this individual. And that use of language that you can use to build bridges of friendship and that you can use to make people feel something, that you can use to make people feel better than they felt before. It's an incredibly, incredibly, incredibly valuable thing. And it's a thing that we must not lose. There is love in language. There is friendship in communication. There is a real ability to heal rifts and wounds of cultures and understandings through the written and spoken word that we are losing. And it's so important because it is part of why we are being divided as a culture, why we are being divided as a group of nations, and why we are being divided as a group of Americans. You lose the ability to express yourself effectively, and you'll wind up in all sorts of problems. Look, let's take the situation to maybe the last chit-chat you had with your boss, and you feel like you had a bunch of stuff that you wanted to say, and it was all prepared in your mind, but it just didn't come out right. You had these feelings and you weren't able to articulate them. And you've been waiting for that meeting with your boss for the last month and a half, and you finally get it. And you're like, I did not make the most of that. I couldn't find the right words. We as a society are less and less able to find the right words. And this is why we're not celebrating reading the way that we used to. And I know this because now, and this is what disturbed me. This irked me. And I know it's just a little tidbit of throwaway information that shouldn't have gotten under my skin, but it's been bothering me since I read it this morning. I had to get it off my chest. 36% of millennials now don't really enjoy communicating with English as much as emojis and GIFs. If the millennials get their way, soon we're just going to dump English completely and move back to using hieroglyphics. And in that case, picture the shocked emoji face to sum up my thoughts. It's true. It's sad. It's unfortunate. And it's going to do real long-term damage. According to a new survey, 36% of people between the ages of 18 and 34 say that emojis and GIFs are way better. And by the way, Funkhouser, as we're talking about expanding one's vocabulary, GIFs, this is a long-term debate that I've heard rage around the office. Is it GIFs? Some people say GIFs, some people say GIFs.
This is a hot topic, and I'd like to respond with no comment.
Great. All right, then. Well, anyways, 36% of people between the ages of 18 and 34 say that the emojis and the GIFs or GIFs are better for communicating their thoughts and feelings than English. Now, I get it. I understand that a picture tells 1,000 words, and there is certainly validity to that. And I'm not saying that these are things that you should be ignoring. But if it's at the expense of the English language and our command of it, I am telling you, this is part of the degradation of us as a people. This is widening the rift between people's beliefs, understandings, and cultures. This is causing a problem. This is causing a deep chasm between people. The fact that we cannot articulately express ourselves. And it doesn't mean breaking out a bunch of SAT words, but it means having the command of the English language necessary to hold a conversation face to face, person to person, as we were talking about on the phone or on the show the other day. Most people use their phones not necessarily for talking on the phone. It's like Aziz Ansari said, if you met somebody from the past and said, hey, you won't believe what phones do now. What, you mean phones? Those things that we used to dial? Those things that, we had those mobile phones where you could make calls. And yeah, but there's so much more now. There's all these different social networks, and you can talk and you can tweet and you can send things out over the internet, and you can message back and forth, and you can send all these little emojis that dictate how you're feeling and express that to other people. And you can surf the internet. You can buy and sell things on your phone. You can do it. Well, what are they like for talking on? Not so great, but they do all this other stuff fantastic. That spoken word thing that we are losing. People communicating mostly through messaging now. People communicating through GIFs and emojis rather than the word. People are having the opportunity to edit their thoughts. Work on a text 2 or 3 times, figure out just the right GIF, just the right emoji, just the right all of the above to communicate what they're thinking. And then taking 5 or 6 minutes to send something like this, where in the past they would have had to pick up the phone or meet someone in person and think on their feet and express themselves clearly and concisely at the drop of a hat. And the fact that we're losing that ability to communicate, through the written and spoken word, it's slowing us down. It is dumbing us down. It is hurting our use of that which could heal us. Now, we single out millennials in this conversation. 36% of people between the ages of 18 and 34 all into emojis and GIFs, as opposed to using the English language. But they're not alone. About 1 in 4 people between 35 and 64 also say emojis work better than English. And so do about 1 in 7 people over the age of 65. When my mom texts me now, it's full of emojis, and that's great. I mean, it's a method of expression that, All right, look, there's certain guys that feel like you should turn in your man card if you use emojis to communicate. Winky smiley face isn't exactly manly men doing manly things. You're not driving a big truck. You're not drinking light beer, and you haven't just killed a small animal if you're winky smiley face. That's the perception anyway. And I get that. But please, during the summertime, do what we were all forced to do when we were kids. Pick up a book, read, and I beg of you, if you have kids, read with your children. Whether you're reading to them if they're that age, or if you're just picking a book that you both enjoy. I was lucky enough to have a father who was into great literature. I was lucky enough to have a mom who celebrated books and reading around the house. And it was something that brought us closer together. Reading the works of P.G. Wodehouse. Reading books like The Pirates in the Deep Green Sea with my dad. This made all the difference in the world. Gave us something to bond over. People are so dug in. People are not communicating with one another. And look, you can't turn back the hands of time. You can't stop the way the world is going. You can't take people's phones away from them and expect them to function. It's just a part of life now. But all too often, and you want to single the kids out for this, as being buried in their phones and not paying attention to their parents, but it works both ways. I was at a restaurant the other day. I was at a pancake house. And I'll never forget. I looked over and I saw this dad. And it's not for me to judge. Who knows what he's doing or what he's going through or what he's dealing with. But he's there with few kids, his kids, going out for pancakes on a Sunday. And these kids are crawling all over him, vying for his attention, asking what kind of syrup they should put on their pancakes, asking if it's pancakes or French toast, and asking if they can get this and that. Taking your kids out for pancakes, to me, from the outside looking in as a parent, is one of the great joys of life. I'll never forget when I got to have pancakes. Didn't matter if we were going out for pancakes or if we were having them in. That was a big deal. That was celebration as far as I was concerned. And it was a moment to revel in. And I'm looking at this dad, and what's he doing? His kids are literally over the moon, hopped up on sugar, having a great old time. And he's buried in his phone. Now, look, like I said, I'm not judging. I don't know what he was going through. He might have been attending to something very important and urgent and timely that he had to do right then at that second on his phone. But I've seen it so often. Parents out spending time with their kids. These magical moments that you're not going to get back. Whether you're at the park or you're at the zoo or you are, I don't know. But I've seen so many parents with their faces buried in their phone. And it's really easy for someone who's not a parent to cast a stone of judgment in this particular direction. But I see so many parents buried in their phone as their kids are going through life and going, you're missing the best stuff. You're missing what's good. What you are failing to pay attention to right now is what makes me feel as though I would like to be a dad one day. Look at what your kids are doing. Look at the way they just kicked that ball. Look at the way they hit that ball. Look at the way they caught that ball. Look at the eyes that are open wide in wonder as they look at the Gila monster at the zoo. And you're texting someone, or you're reading an email, or you're on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whatever. You're ignoring the good stuff. And as we get more and more divided, as we get more and more separated, not only from strangers who believe differently than we do, but also from those that are closest to us in our lives. Couples go to bed now looking at their phones, ignoring one another. This person that you thought when the relationship just started, if you could only just be with them, if you could wake up next to them, if you could fall asleep next to them, life would be so much different and so much better, and it would mean so much more. And then, yeah, what'd you say? I'm sorry. I was just responding to this tweet, this person who was wrong on the internet, and I got to let them know that as I fall asleep. No. Be together. Share something. And reading, books, literature. This is a fantastic thing to share. So I beg you, as we make our way into the meat of the summer, do a little summer reading. Pull out a book. Reread something that meant a lot to you when you were a kid. Share it with your kids. Share it with a friend. Talk about what it is you've just read. Read. I promise you, it'll make the world a better place. All right, Funkhouser. Should we do some news when we return?
I mean, I guess so, if you want to.
Well, there's an interesting piece of news about Facebook, about which we were eschewing so vitriolically.
Whoa.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I don't know if those are actual words, but I like to think they are.
You're waiting to get washed away. Radio 104.1.
Now, more AD on the radio.
Back once again, the ill behavior, delivering and giving you my musical savior. Back once again, it's your boy AD, and can't nobody rock a body better than me. Back once again.
I really want you to read some P.G. Wodehouse. Like, I get so much joy out of it. I would feel irresponsible not passing it along to other people. So before we do, in fact, get into the news, I want to share a little bit with you. A couple more quotes. I guess his most famous characters would be Jeeves and Wooster. Jeeves is a butler. Wooster is his sort of ne'er-do-well idiot guy that keeps him in his employ. And, well, I'll just read a couple of these to you. There are moments, Jeeves, when one asks oneself, do trousers matter? The mood will pass, sir. Or what about this one? I love this one. He had the look of one who had drunk the cup of life and found a dead beetle in the bottom. I could see that, if not actually disgruntled, he was far from being disgruntled. I always advise people never to give advice. And here's another classic that he used to describe both men and women. She looked as if she had been poured into her clothes and had forgotten to say when. It's beautiful stuff. Read some P.G. Woodhouse. Share it with a friend. All right, Funkhouser. Well, what is going on in the news?
Well, 43-year-old Kate Beckinsale is now dating a guy who's 21.
Or, as Madonna knows him, Gramps. Kate Beckinsale's 43?
Hello.
To Google. Really? Well done.
Kate's Beckinsales.
Yes, Kate's Beckinsales. Impressive stuff. Good for her. Is she English?
It sounds like that with that name. I can't place her. Can't remember.
Yes, Kate Beckinsale. I don't even know what she's been in. Hold on. What is Kate Beckinsale from?
I haven't Googled, but I'm going to guess that she was in Austin Powers. Was she that lady in Austin Powers?
No. That's Elizabeth Hurley.
That's who comes
Elizabeth
to mind
Hurley.
when I think of Kate Beckinsale.
Oh, you know what? She was in all the Underworld movies.
Oh.
That's who she is. She was in Underworld and Van Helsing and Whiteout and Contraband and all those flicks. But yes, Kate Beckinsale, 43 and dating a 21-year-old who, as we said, Madonna knows as Gramps. Go on.
Charlie Sheen is selling Babe Ruth's 1927 World Series ring.
Well, to be accurate, it's Babe Ruth's 1927 cocaine-coated World Series ring, so it's probably worth a little bit more. I wonder why he's selling it off.
It's fine.
I wonder why. Ew. I wonder why. Do you think that Charlie Sheen's having money problems?
Well, probably. I mean, the first thing to go would probably be Babe Ruth's World Series ring.
World Series ring? I don't even know what something like that is worth. I couldn't even begin to speculate.
We're not going to sell the Tiger Blood just yet. Hold on to that.
Well, there you go. What else?
Kristen Cavallari says her marriage to Jay Cutler isn't perfect.
Right. Yeah. Like that time he threw her a birthday party, and it was intercepted. Go on. It's funny because as a football player, he has not had the greatest of records, or at least he has not lived up to the hype, which no one can really do. People remember the failures more than they do the successes, because whenever you're someone that's supposed to be this big-ass deal, there's all this heightened pressure, and like I said, people remember the failures as opposed to the successes. And if you don't lead a team to ultimate victory, who are you anyway? You just want to get on the same page and all be firing on all cylinders at the same time as your other players, but oftentimes that doesn't happen, and it falls to the quarterback or the pitcher to shoulder the brunt of the blame. Yep, so really, who could expect his marriage to Kristen Cavallari to be perfect? Poor Jay Cutler. He'll be just fine. Go on.
Facebook celebrated yesterday's 20th anniversary of the publication of the first Harry Potter book with a special tribute.
Yeah, I saw that. It was like if you move the cursor over the words Harry Potter, like a magic wand came out and lightning bolts and stuff. It was kind of a neat thing that they did. Of course, Facebook uses its own wizardry every day when it makes everyone's productivity magically disappear.
Pretty much.
Go on.
A new study says the mere presence of a smartphone reduces brain power.
You don't even have to be on it. It was just around, it reduces your brain power, because what are you doing? You're thinking about it. It really is an addictive thing. And I would give anything to go back to the days of not having a smartphone. I was like the last holdout with this stuff. People would be like, I sent you an email. I'm like, right, but I'm out. Like, I'd get these calls. It'd be my day off. I would be out and I would get a phone call from someone being like, hey, did you get that email I sent you? I'm like, no, I'm out. And this is not that long ago. And they're like, right. But I was like, no, I don't have a smartphone. I'll check my email when I get home. If it's important, you can do something like this, like call me. And so now there's this professional obligation and expectation that if somebody sends you an email, you need to return it. Doesn't matter what you're doing, where you are, all of the above. Unless you have one of those away messages, people want their response and they want it quick, smart. And look, as much as we think that we have the ability to multitask and compartmentalize our brain functions, we really, really do not have that ability. So your smartphone just being around, being present, is scientifically proven to reduce your brain power because it's splitting off some of what you've got going on in another direction. It's distracting you. You're not giving something your full focus and your full attention. It was funny when we talked to when we talked to Travis Pastrana the other day. This guy, freestyle motocross legend, essentially the Tony Hawk of the motorcycle world. He's got a lot going on. He's got all these different X Games gold medals in all these different motocross disciplines. He's also an X Games gold medal winning rally racer. And this whole thing, Nitro Circus, that's his brainchild, like the take at the concession stand, this personal safety of the riders that are all a part of it. This is his responsibility. And I was like, how do you put all that out of your mind when it's time to get on the ramp? He's like, it's really easy. If you don't focus, you could die. So you tend to focus. But we're not focusing on our lives like it's a life or death situation, because it's not. And because of that, because of just the mere presence of your smartphone, your brain is diminished as it's dragged off in all sorts of different directions. Also, this study of the smartphone reducing brain power, I think was done by watching the Kardashians take selfies. So there's that too.
Everyone is so smart.
KPRC, more stimulating talk radio.
There's something happening here, and you should know what it is. The Dumbing Up of America. Now, more AD on the radio.
All right, Funkhouser, are you doing that 4th of July barbecue thing? Well, okay, all right. Let me just. I use the word barbecue because it's sort of a colloquialism. Really, what you're probably doing, unless you have like an actual set of barbecue apparatus, is you are probably you're probably grilling. You're cooking out, but everybody calls it barbecue. While barbecue is actually to do with the smoking of meats. So there's that. But are you having a cookout?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
We'll see where. I mean, I was supposed to go down to San Diego, but my friend is sick, so I might not make it. He's got like a farm where you can like blow up fireworks and stuff.
Oh.
Not legally, of course.
Not legally, of course, bearing in mind that part of Southern California
Highly
is incredibly
flammable.
susceptible to brush fires. And if there is a giant fire that destroys homes and lives over the 4th of July holiday weekend, we're all going to be looking at you guys, but potato.
No such thing as the Funkhouser fire this weekend, please.
So if you stay home with mom and pa and you grill up a bunch of food, how much do you suppose that should cost you? Like per person that comes over to the cookout, like how much do you expect to spend?
I'm going to guess $15 to $20.
Well, here's the thing. I have excellent news for you about the price of a successful 4th of July cookout, and we'll get into it a little later on. Right now, though, let's continue what remains of the news.
$25.
That's your guess?
Yeah, I'm going up now.
We're going to do Price is Right style.
There.
We're going to do Price is Right style. If you go over, you lose. We'll get into what 4th of July should cost you in just a little bit. Right now, though, what is going on?
A study says yoga can change your genes.
I called Funkhouser the other day at like the crack of 11 or whatever it was. And you're like, I was just taking a little nappy nap. I got up to do like core power yoga at 6 a.m.
Oh,
this
no,
morning.
man. It's always TRX.
Oh, TRX? Sorry, I confused
It's only
the different types of yoga. Do you feel as though your body is being transformed?
I don't know. You tell me.
Wow.
I'll take a picture. No, I think so. I can get through it now. But I took 6 weeks off, and then when I went back, I was very under-yoga'd.
Under-yoga'd? Mm-hmm. And like this is like what you do is yoga with resistance training. So it's not just stretching. There's like weight and stuff involved or things that will actually qualify as exercise.
Yeah, you use your own body weight against you, basically pulling yourself up and down and doing twists and stuff.
Well, as it turns out, a study says that yoga can actually change your genes. That said, so can eating Twinkies. Mine have jumped like 3 sizes since I started this job, so there's that. What else?
According to researchers, people are more likely to eat healthy if food has an ingredient name like sizzling beans as opposed to beans.
Oh, like a sort of fancy, appetizing, indulgent name?
Yeah.
Sizzling beans as opposed to plain old beans will make people more likely to eat healthy. Right. Like instead of how they were going to call it horse rectum, they call it the McRib. More appetizing. I get it. I understand. Continue.
Still tasty. Salvador Dali's body is being dug up so his DNA can be tested in a paternity suit.
Yeah, legendary. Oh, man. So this is going to sound very exotic, but it's not. You got to bear in mind that growing up in England, doing this was like going to Florida for like the week.
Still exotic.
But I went to like this sort of the town almost on the border between France and Spain, where Salvador Dali did most of his work. And, he's famous for all like the melting clocks and that sort of style of surrealism. Salvador Dali's work, right? So he's that guy. And what's interesting is this area of Spain/France it's covered in this molten, well, not molten anymore, but at one point it was molten, this sort of like melted looking volcanic rock. And you 100% see how, oh man, he hung out, he saw this, and that's where he got all the ideas for clocks that were melting. Now I understand how Salvador Dali happens. And it's a fascinating thing to see in a beautiful part of the country. And I think you can get like an incredible room on Airbnb that overlooks the water for like something ridiculous, like $25 a night. So go check out the home of Salvador Dali. It's good times. You got to get over to Europe to do it, but nevertheless, I highly recommend it. But yeah, his body's being dug up so his DNA can be tested in a paternity suit. He's obviously got a humongous estate, and if he was a bit of a master swordsman as well as a great painter, well, he might have left behind some kids that weren't properly identified as being his that could be entitled to something in this paternity suit. So yeah, it's crazy that they've got to dig him up, but they've done it. I think the DNA will be tested. Later this week, and the results will be available as soon as the clock melts and slides off the wall.
I was going to say something like that. Poor kid has one leg much longer than the other.
Go on.
Nazi artifacts were found behind a bookcase in Argentina.
Yep, they've got a street market value of whatever Steve Bannon decides to pay for them. That's not fair.
Savage.
He's
not
not
you.
allowed in. Savage isn't allowed in England anymore, I think. Like a lot of the,
like that word,
it's weird.
Or?
A lot of the sort of like the talk show hosts aren't allowed into. Like I think Alex Jones isn't allowed in England. And I think that Michael Savage is not allowed.
I didn't want to go to England anyway.
In England, it is a weird thing. I love Michael Savage. Out of all the talk show hosts, Michael Savage is my favorite. And people go, really? That guy? That guy's your favorite? Like, not taking anything away from Savage, but people look at me and sort of like the way I view the world and go, Savage, I would not have thought that. And the thing that I love about Savage is he's so wildly entertaining. He's like the Kanye West of talk radio. I love... You know how Dave Chappelle?
So you're part of the nation, I hear?
I don't know if I'm part of the nation. I just used to like listening to Michael Savage a lot. Like before I was even, I think before I was in radio, before I was thinking of doing radio, let alone talk radio, I just thought he was so outrageous. And he was like Kanye West. You know how Dave Chappelle says the first time he ever met Kanye West, nobody knew him, but they're just standing in a room listening to Jay-Z's Black album, and there's a part of Jay-Z's Black record where Jay-Z goes, Kanye, you're a genius, you did it again, or something like that. And Chappelle said Kanye stood up and went, rewind the record and play that back. Like Chappelle, Savage does the same stuff. I don't know if you've ever heard him do this, but he'll pull up old tapes of him from like a couple of years ago. He's like, listen to this. Listen to me accurately predicting what's going on now. No, I don't think you really caught the brilliant genius that I was responsible for back in 2001. Rewind it back. Play it again. Soak in my genius. Know this. And that's what I always loved about Savage. He is like the Kanye West of talk radio. And I love how he can go from like ranting and raving, because he's also sort of like this weird... Not weird. He's this contradiction of being a talk show host that has some very right-leaning beliefs to being sort of like a hippie when it comes to food and nutrition. Like he's sort of a big believer in organic gardening and stuff like that. So he'll be on his high horse talking about how certain people need to be pushed off a cliff or something like that, and ranting and raving in the most unbelievably right-wing way that you could ever rant and rave. And then all of a sudden he brings it back down to, I remember when I was a kid, we used to make peach pies with peaches fresh out of the garden. It's amazing. So, If you're listening, Michael Savage, good job. As I'm sure he is.
We'll tag him. You know for sure he'll listen then.
Yeah, well, go on.
The busiest McDonald's in the world is in Moscow.
Well, mostly due to the main ingredient in all their shakes being vodka. Hey, by the way...
It is good, man. You throw it upside down, it doesn't come out.
It was so funny. So my dad's job was an interesting one. He moved to Kosovo several years ago to work for the UN. And what he was sort of doing was he was helping Kosovo establish their form of democracy. I'm like, well, what does that look like, Dad? How's that go? He's like, well, there's certain things like, okay, the first McDonald's in Kosovo was being opened up. And now, obviously, there's going to be tons of people in line wanting to open up a McDonald's franchise. And so there was a lottery situation to see who gets to open up the first McDonald's in Kosovo. And so what my dad's job was to keep that lottery fair, make sure that some sort of mobster type of situation didn't muscle in on it and cause corruption within the process with which they decided who gets to open up the McDonald's franchise. Because, there's all sorts of lawlessness in these situations and people trying to muscle in at the beginning, sort of like a gold rush. The first McDonald's, well, whoever is in charge of that is going to be printing money. So there's unscrupulous people that want to get their hands on the operation. It was my dad's job to keep the lottery to see who gets the first McDonald's fair. This is going back several years ago, but that was one of the things he had to do. And I was like, so it's open now. What's McDonald's in Kosovo like? He's like, it's a little different. I was like, how so? He's like, well, they've got cabbage burgers. I was like, no.
We will not make a decision until we hear from Grimace.
Cabbage burgers. So, yeah, I would imagine that similarly, the busiest McDonald's in the world in Moscow also serves cabbage-related food. It's incredible. It's such a great idea. Go on.
It's like Vegemite. I can't eat cabbage. I can just grow it.
Really?
Yeah, I can't get behind cabbage. Not for me.
If cabbage is one of those things where if it's cooked with stuff that tastes, if it's slathered in enough things that make it taste like something else, I can kind of gag it down. But otherwise, I'm with you on cabbage. You know what I found a new appreciation for? They were the sworn enemy of childhood me. Yet Brussels sprouts, I've had them recently, and they're not so bad. It's just the whole idea of putting an actual Brussels sprout in your mouth. Not into that. I still think... And when you cook Brussels sprouts, the whole house smells like fart. It's no good. I would never bring home Brussels sprouts and cook them because that's just a wildly unpleasant thing to do to you and anyone else in the house and your neighbors. However, I've discovered that in some dishes, little sort of slices of Brussels sprouts, so there's sort of an accent to the dish, can be absolutely scrumdiddlyumptious. Yes.
There's a plant growing outside right now that we think is Brussels sprout, but I think it's a weed, and nature will tell us in about 3 weeks, I think.
Well, so you could ask it if you could ask it if it was a Brussels sprout, but it being Brussels sprout, you'll never get a straight answer out of it, because as we all know, Brussels is part of Belgium. And it's difficult, like I said, getting a straight answer out of anything related to Belgium because Belgians waffle.
I'm sorry, what was that? One more time in case somebody didn't hear that.
No, I think they can rewind that. Yeah, rewind that. Play that back. Listen to how brilliant I was. Go on.
President Trump referred to Obamacare as a dead carcass. Okay.
Well, when it comes to dead carcasses, take it from the guy who's got one on top of his head.
Okay.
Go on.
That's it.
That's it.
Yeah, my news is done. Is you got more headlines over there? Because the newspaper is over.
Oh well, I guess if we're man, we need to talk about how much 4th of July should cost you. Funkhouser, if you're planning on spending $25 per person, well then, you're in good shape. 3 out of 5 people say they're going to barbecue for the 4th of July next week. Most popular cookout day of the year. And the good news, if you're hosting one, apparently it's not going to come anywhere near close to breaking the bank. The American Farm Bureau just released an annual study on how much a summer cookout should cost. $55.70 for 10 people, or about $5.60 per person. There you go. Now you know.